interests in a stable world order. And the way you create a stable world order is by giving the rising powers a stake, make them responsible stakeholders in the key global institutions. But it is very difficult for anybody who holds a privileged position to give up his or her power. Let me give you some examples, okay? The two most powerful international economic organizations in the world are IMF and the World Bank. And even till today, there's a rule that says that to be the head of the IMF, you have to be a European. To be the head of the World Bank, you must be American. And 3.5 billion Asians don't qualify. And this is amazing. Asia today has the fastest growing economies. Asia has the largest pool of reserves, foreign reserves in the world. Asians have demonstrated that they can do equally well in economic enterprises, but Asians are not qualified to run these two institutions. And by the way, this practice was reaffirmed as recently as 2007, last year, when you had a change of the leadership of both World Bank and the IMF, and they still went back to the old practice. Now, this is an example where you've got to discard these anachronistic rules to adjust to the rise of Asia. Another example, the UN Security Council, right? It was a very wise move on the part of the Founding Fathers to create the principle of permanent membership, to ensure that the great powers of the day had a stake in the UN and didn't walk away from it as they did with the League of Nations, right? It's a good principle to give the great powers of the day a stake in the United Nations. But what you have today in the UN Security Council is not the great powers of today, not the great powers of tomorrow, but the great powers of yesterday. Indeed, the only qualification for permanent membership seems to be that you must have won World War II in 1945. And this rule has got to go. I mean, take, for example, the Europeans celebrating the fact that they're going to have a common European foreign policy in January 2009. They can finally provide Henry Kissinger a telephone number that he can call to find out what the foreign policy of Europe is. Great. Then in this case, have a single European seat in the UN Security Council and no longer have separate seats for UK and France. But neither UK nor France will give up their privileged positions.
You are saying that the real danger here is the failure of the West to adjust to the new political realities that are emerging because of the rise of Asia. And I want to understand, why is that? Is it that people have ideas in their head and they refuse to change? I'm talking about the West now. Is it that the Western intellectuals are not defining this new world and those new ideas are not entering the policy debate? Or is it that Western politicians are worried about the next election?
Well, I think it's a combination of all those factors. And in a sense, this is why I felt a tremendous pressure to write the book at this stage, because we are now entering one of the most plastic moments of world history. We're going to see shifts of power of a scale that has never before been seen in human history. Incredible shifts of power. Now, with so much shifts of power, you have to begin to adjust and accommodate. And this is where the West, which has got used to 2 centuries of domination of world history, has got to make adjustments. And so, in the West, which always sees itself as being the solution to a problem, cannot conceive of the possibility that the West may now be part of the problem and not just part of the solution. And this idea, by the way, is very difficult to implant in Western minds, because even the most sophisticated intellectuals in the West cannot accept this. Let me give you a simple, concrete example. Soon after my book came out, The Economist gave it a review. And I was very pleased that The Economist gave it a whole-page review. But what did they say the book is? They say the book is an anti-Western polemic. Now, that's a complete misunderstanding of what the book is all about. Indeed, I keep emphasizing that the new Asians don't want to dominate the West, they want to replicate the West. They want to become equal partners of the West. But it is the West that refuses to accept this equal partnership. It is the West that refuses to give up its privileged positions, whether it's in the IMF or World Bank or UN Security Council and so on and so forth. And so the West is today the biggest threat to the world. Now, for me to even say a simple sentence like the West is the biggest threat to the world today is inconceivable to Western minds. It's absolutely inconceivable. Mm-hmm. And this is why when I explain in my introduction to this book that this book is a painful book. I don't deny that. In fact, my wife, as you know, advised me not to publish it. She said, you're going to get many of your friends unhappy in the West. I say that's true. But the discomfort you feel on reading my book is the necessary discomfort you have to go through to begin to understand the nature of the new world that is emerging.
Mm-hmm. If you look at the presidential debates in the United States, and you look at the issues that you raise, almost none of them are being discussed. I mean, so it's somewhat frightening, that we seem to be incapable of learning from a book like yours, on the one hand, that is the elites. But the second is one doesn't see a way out except for the collapse that you're trying to warn against.
Yeah. The American presidential debates are distressing because they focus on very short-term issues and they make no effort to look at the world outside. But I think the world has also got used to the fact that most American presidential candidates say one thing during the election campaign and do something completely opposite. I mean, take Bill Clinton, for example. During the election campaign, he said, unlike President George H.W. Bush, I will not coddle the dictators of Beijing. Right? Mm-hmm. That was in 1992. I saw him in November 1993 do an incredible job of reaching out to the Chinese leader, Jiang Zemin, at the Blake Island meeting in Seattle. And I was present there and I watched the two of them. And he obviously coddled the dictator from Beijing and did a very good job of it after he got elected. In the same way, I think that, for example, if Barack Obama is elected, just the sheer fact that a man like Barack Obama is elected would be a tremendous boost because he would get rid of half of the anti-Americanism around the world. For the rest of the world to see a member of a minority like Barack Obama win the highest office in the land will send a wonderful, powerful message to the rest of the world. And they will say, what a great and wonderful country America is again. So, it's not just about what they say, it's also about the symbolism of who they elect in these elections.
You're making the distinction in the book between Western values, which the East has followed through on, versus the changing Western interests, and the extent to which that because of elections, because of threat to economic interests, say farmers in Europe, that what we're seeing here is the West